Okay, so have you had a chance to take a look at the exam questions for this class?
Not yet. I was gonna do it after this session.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and take a look at the exam questions together. So, oops, let me bring them up. Oops, Daisy. Okay, so, oh, I forgot I need to share my screen. Sorry, brain barely working here at the end of the semester. All right. Share, there we go. Okay, so let's bring up the exam questions and we can go over them. Okay, so the exam questions are on the Canvas site. You can download them now and begin taking a look at them. Or not now, but I mean, they're available. Oh, looks like somebody else is joining. Hold on. Hi, Julia, how are you? Julia, you're muted. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm good. Sorry, my thing wasn't working for a second.
That's okay. We're just, I just wanted to let you know that I am recording this for other students. And also, we've just started going over the exam questions. Julia, have you had a chance to look at the exam questions yet or not yet?
Not yet.
Okay, that's totally fine. Oh, here comes more people. I started too soon. Hold on. Hi, Sam.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Just wanted to let you know that we are recording this for students who aren't able to attend, and that also we just got started. So we're just starting to go over the exam questions for the exam.
Okay.
Sam, have you had a chance to look at the exam questions yet or not?
No, not yet, but I can
Okay.
pull them up. I'm in
That's
my
totally
studio
fine.
right now.
I just was checking. Okay, so the exam questions are on Canvas and they are ready for y'all to download. And let me just go over the, we can just talk a little bit about the expectations for the exam, but mostly to go over the questions and see if you have any questions about the questions, okay? The expectations for the exam are the same as, the midterm exam. And so, the expectations for the exam are outlined in the final exam information and study session. So let me bring that up there. And so just make sure that you review those before you start working on your exam. The final exams were 200 points, and so it's worth 20% of your overall grade. And so that's a pretty significant amount. The good news is that if you're like in between a grade, right, you can, and you do really well on the final exam, you can really pull your grade up in the class. And, it is worth a lot of points, but it can actually, make a difference in terms of the final exam that the final exam or the final grade that you're going to get for the course. As was the case for the midterm exam, there are 6 questions on the final exam, and you answer 4 of those questions, okay? And as we did in the past, I like it when you include the question in the exam, just so that you can refer back to it as you're writing your answer, but then also it just helps me as I'm grading as well, just to have the question right there. A student asked me on email this morning if including the questions counts to your overall page total for the exam, and it does not. I mean, so the total page length for the exam is, about 8 pages, but I mean, if it's a little bit less, that's fine. If it's a little bit more, that's fine. And the questions are going to add to that page total. So don't worry about it if you go over the page total, because I know that the questions take up some space, okay? And then just in terms of the the expectations that, the expectations are the same as they were for the midterm exam. One thing is, as we're going over the questions, I always include multiple prompts, like questions within the questions. So make sure that you answer all of the prompts, okay? So that a lot of times students lose points because they forget to answer one of the points or one of the prompts. So make sure that you answer, as it says there, answer each prompt in the essay question. Also, when you're answering these questions, I want you to make sure that you're using all of the course material. And so what do I mean by that? If you answer the questions in the exam and you're only using the textbook, or you're only using the lecture, and you're only making reference to those, like only lectures or only textbook, that's not going to be good enough. I'm looking for you to pull upon all the material that we've used in the second half of the semester. So the best answers will use some information from the textbook, some information from the lectures, and also any articles that we've read and any movies that we've watched as well. And feel free to use locked in. You don't have to, but if there's something that in your answer that you'd like to reference locked in, go for it. Okay. So I'm basically looking for you to demonstrate that you have a broad-based understanding of the course material. And so make sure that you're sort of pulling upon the course material as you're answering the questions. Now, I think, as I say in here, for each question, you don't have to use something from the textbook, from something from the lecture, something from the articles. I'm grading it looking at the whole. Okay. So for one of the answers you're pulling on primarily from a lecture, that's fine. But make sure in the other answer, you're pulling upon the textbook, articles, etc. Does that make sense in terms of that expectation? Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Julia, does that make
yeah.
sense? Sam, we're all good.
I did have one small question.
Yeah, definitely.
When it comes to topic lectures, let's say I still haven't even looked at the questions, but let's say like I bring up something regarding the Chauvin trial. Would I be allowed to use something a little more present, like the Rittenhouse trial or the Brooks hearing, or anything in between that?
Yeah, that's a good
That was kind of more of a celebrity case.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't really like it when students use a lot of external material to answer like questions that are answered in the textbook or lecture. So for example, if I'm sort of asking you, describe or define prosecutorial discretion and what are the factors that impact prosecutorial discretion, sometimes students will be like, use some article from the internet to answer that question. And it's like, no. That information is both in the lecture and the textbook. So there I want you to like constrain yourself to using course material. However, if there's a great example, like from the Rittenhouse case or from, any sort of news article that you've read about criminal justice that applies really well to like elucidate a point that you're making in your exam, go for it. That's great. Okay. So examples, current examples, that's perfect to use if you want to. If you don't use them, it's cool. But if you want to use it, you won't be downgraded in any ways. But don't like use external, like, like according to Cornell law. I get that a lot.
Oh yeah, no, not like that. Nothing like that. Just
cool. Good question. And that actually does then follow into like the just for citing materials. And so as you see there on the screen, it's the same citation method that is used that we used for the midterm. Just if you're using either a direct citation. Well, if you do use direct citations, make sure they're in quotation marks. If you're citing it, but not directly, you'll still want to use like in parentheses in the text, like introduction to criminal justice in the page number, or just like topic 9, lecture 1. You don't have to get more specific than that. Okay. And you don't need to use a bibliography for this unless you really are using an external source. Okay. So And also just proofread and make sure that your answers are sort of easy to follow. Because if I get mired in like, what are they trying to say? Like, then, that makes it difficult to grade. All right. So do you guys have any questions about the expectations for the exam?
No, ma'am.
Okay, great. And it's due Saturday night at that'd be December 18th. So you've got some time to work on it. All right, let's go in and take a look at the actual questions. And I'm assuming you can see my screen, right? I mean, the screen is sharing. Yes, is that safe to assume? You can see it?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And let me enlarge it just a tad. I think, yeah, there we go. Okay, so the exam is worth 200 points. And make sure you guys are here. So, I already told you to look at the guidelines for the exam and the final exam information. So, review that as needed. And I always like to remind my students, when you download the exam, immediately save it to your desktop, a hard drive, or to a zip drive, so that you're not working on the material. And then when you upload it, you're like, oh shoot, I forgot to save it, right? And then you upload a blank document. Also just, cut and paste. I oftentimes, when I'm working on a document that I'm paranoid about, like, oh, I hope I don't lose the material, I'll just copy paste into a secondary document. Just, you don't have to do that. But if you're paranoid like I am, like, I hate losing work that I've been working on. So just be, bottom line is make sure that as you're working on it, that you've saved it to something, other than download or whatever, so that you make sure that you have that. All right. So also I am due for final exams, since I have a lot of grading to do at the end of the semester, I make it an option for students about whether they want comments or not. And so as it says there, like, if you want me to make comments on your final exam, I'm totally happy to do that. But a lot of times I can see whether or not students looked at documents on Canvas. And a lot of times for final exams, people just see the grade and they're like, yay, or like shit, and they just move on, So for final exams, if you want comments, let me know. And the way you do that is that when you upload your exam, just say, please leave me comments about my performance, and I'll be more than happy to do that. If you don't do that, then if students say, I don't need the comments, I'm just looking for the grade, then, just leave that blank. So do keep that in mind, that if you want comments, to let me know in the Canvas comments, or drop me a text or an email. Okay. That just makes it a little bit easier when I'm grading. And also, I don't want to put comments there that students just ultimately aren't going to be taking a look at. All right, let's take a look at the substance of each question. And then after we'll do each question, and then I'll ask you if you have specific questions about the question. All right, so the first question is about the Fourth Amendment. And it says, the Fourth Amendment states the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable search and seizure shall not be violated. And so I'm first asking you, just what does that mean? Okay, what is the meaning of that clause from the Fourth Amendment? In lecture, we talked about what constitutes a search. Okay, and so what is a search? And here I'm not talking about like an example of a search, but really, what does the Supreme Court says constitutes a search? Okay, so in lecture, we sort of talked about that. When we're thinking about the Fourth Amendment, a search is really when a government agent is searching something. If a private person is searching the private, a property or the private effects of another person, the Fourth Amendment really doesn't apply. Okay. And we also talked about like that there's this idea about privacy. So just a little hints there. So, sort of when you say, what is a search? I'm sort of looking at the way the court has defined what constitutes a search. In other words, when does the Fourth Amendment apply? Okay, because the Fourth Amendment applies to searches as defined by the Supreme Court. And then what makes a search unreasonable? Do police need to have a warrant for a search to be considered reasonable? Explain. Okay, so those questions following what does that clause in the Fourth Amendment mean? Those follow-up prompts are just to get you to speak more broadly about what that clause means. Okay, you can add other things if you want. Okay, but that's just sort of like points to consider. And then the other thing I want you to do is select 2 Fourth Amendment cases from Chapter 8. They have to be from Chapter 8. that you found to be particularly interesting. And there's some really cool cases that are referenced in chapter 8. Describe each of the cases, including the decision of the court. What do these cases tell us about the Fourth Amendment search and seizure? And do you agree with how the court ruled in this case? Explain. Okay. So it's big picture is what's a search as defined by the Fourth Amendment and the Supreme Court? And then give me 2 examples of cases that we read about that you thought were really interesting, and explain the case and explain to me why you thought that was interesting and what it tells us about the search capacity of police and other government agents. So that's question 1. I'm going to just go person by person. Thought, do you have questions about question 1?
No.
Julia?
Nope.
How about you, Sam?
No, ma'am.
Okay, pretty straightforward. The second question is about the court structure in the United States. And so I want you to describe the structure and purpose of the court system in the United States. If you would like, it says, feel free to draw a diagram of the court system and insert it into your answer, because sometimes that's, easy to do. It's sort of like we talked about the court structure in lecture. Your textbook talks about the court structure. And so feel free to, draw that up if you want, and then take a screenshot of it and just insert it into your, into your document. Don't cut and paste something from like a site that, like is pre-made, but if you want to do it by hand, feel free, but you don't have to. That's just an option. And then points to consider. We talked about this in lecture. What role does federalism and federal supremacy play in the structure of the court system? How are federal courts different from state courts? Describe the purpose and function of the 3 types of courts we talked about: trial, appellate, and Supreme Courts. And then finally, the critical thinking kind of prompt there is, of these 3 courts, which do you think is most essential to realizing criminal justice? Why? Explain your answer. And so, as I noted for the midterm, don't throw away the critical thinking prompt. That differentiates A's from non-A's, right? And so tell me, if you think the appellate, courts are the most important for criminal justice, explain to me why, or trial or Supreme Courts. There's no right answer to that, but don't just throw that prompt to the side. Dig into it a little bit. So any questions about that question?
No questions.
Julia?
Nope.
Sam, what about you?
No, ma'am.
Okay, good. The third one is about, I couldn't decide whether to do prosecutors or defense attorneys, but since we spent a lot of time talking about prosecutors and Locked In, and not everybody watched the Gideon's Army optional documentary, I thought I'd just go with prosecutors. And so this is describe the duty and responsibilities of the prosecutor. How are these different from the duties of the defense attorney? When it comes to charging an individual with a crime, the prosecutor has a lot of discretion. Talked about that a lot in Locked In. Why do we give the prosecutor that prosecutorial discretion? What's the purpose and consequence of prosecutorial discretion? And there you're probably going to want to talk about benefits of that and negatives of that. Locked In talks about a lot of the negatives of prosecutorial discretion, but there's some positives to having that as well. And then finally, the textbook lists 4 factors that the prosecutor takes into consideration when deciding whether to proceed with the case. So like system factors, case factors, et cetera. We talked about that in lecture. And so of these 4 factors, there's 4 of them. Which 2 do you think are most likely to impact a prosecutorial's charging decision? Again, there's no right or wrong answer. Just you tell me, which do you think are, from what we've learned this semester, are most likely to impact a prosecutor? Explain. And then the critical thinking prompt. Do you think prosecutorial discretion is beneficial or detrimental to the system of criminal justice in the United States? Explain. Okay. So again, dig into that critical thinking prompt there at the end. All right. I won't go person by person. I'll just say, do you have any questions about question 3?
No, ma'am.
Great. Question 4 is pretty straightforward. Not my favorite question, but I know that students sometimes really like to do sort of more descriptive questions. But it's descriptive, but it's also critical thinking a little bit. So identify and describe the steps in the trial process. And just as a reminder, the trial process starts with jury selection. So you'll want to do a brief description. You do not need to tell me everything you know about each of the steps, okay? Just summarize each of the steps. And of the steps in the trial process, which 2 steps do you think are most crucial for ensuring a just and fair criminal trial, okay? And so for this one, since it's a pretty straightforward description, really, if you do this question, really dig into that critical thinking prompt, right? I think there's good arguments to be made for like any step in the process being crucial to a just and fair trial, okay? But you make a case for which 2 and then explain your answer. Any questions? All right. The 5th one is like a apply what you've learned question. And so in this, there's a hypothetical case, and that I want you to act like a sentencing judge. And what I want you to describe the sentence you would give this person, and you have complete discretion in terms of the sentence you impose. That's just sort of like hypothetical. Usually judges like are bound a little bit. I mean, sometimes they have complete discretion, but hey, you can do whatever you want with this in terms of the way you sentence this person. Now, in lecture and in the textbook, we talked about that there are many goals of sentencing. Identify and explain 2 of these goals that you hope to achieve by the sentence, okay? And so we talked about like incapacitation as a goal, general deterrence as a goal. There are many. For this case, you're the sentencing judge, so tell me, this is the sentence you're going to give this person, and then tell me, what goal do you hope to achieve with the sentence? 2 of those. And then make sure to identify the type of sentence. Do you want it to be determinate or indeterminate? Okay, and you'll pick one, and hopefully explain which one why your sentence is determinate or indeterminate, and then explain why you selected the type. Again, you don't have to abide by Wisconsin law. Wisconsin law is a determinate sentencing structure. You could choose indeterminate. You can choose whatever you want. And then there are the factors that judges can consider when sentencing. Legal factors. There are some illegal ones, so don't consider those. But tell me the 3 factors you took into consideration when imposing the sentence. Okay. And the hypothetical case is kind of interesting. It's about a woman who was drunk driving. And that she pulled over to the side of the road. She passed out. She fell asleep. Somebody on the block saw and called it in. And when the cops come, they take her in. But that the woman forgot to tell the cops, or was not capable of telling the cops, that her child was in the back of the van. And so they took her away. But then when they came to tow the car, when the car was, what does it say? The police arrested the defendant for drunk driving, but the defendant did not tell the police that her 4-year-old daughter was in the backseat of the van asleep. The child was found crying the next morning by the tow lot company. So they towed the van. And she had been in the van for like 8 hours. It's really cold. She was really scared. She had soiled herself. And so then this person pleads guilty to operating a vehicle while intoxicated and 2 counts of child endangerment. And then there's recommendations that the prosecutor makes and the defense attorney makes in terms of the kind of sentence that they would like her to receive. So you're the sentencing judge, and so take into consideration that hypothetical, and then tell me the sentence. You have complete discretion and the factors that you took into consideration, and the 2 goals that you hope to achieve. Okay, just kind of a fun question. I've thought, Julia, Sam, any questions about the question?
I feel like all of my questions are just going to give away the answers. So I'm withholding.
That's totally fine. Tha and Julia, any questions?
No questions.
Nope, no questions.
Number 6 is pretty straightforward. It's, to have you describe the Pennsylvania and the Auburn prison system. Textbook spends a lot of time on that. I spent a lot of time on that in lecture as well. Compare and contrast the 2 systems. What are the goals of these different prison types? what are the values and assumptions regarding human nature that are reflected in these systems? And then, and when you talk about human nature, we're talking about like the way people are like essentially like naturally, like if you say that humans are naturally selfish and self-interest, it's like they're born that way. And so, the Pennsylvania system has some pretty strong perspectives about human nature. So does the Auburn system. And so tell me what those two systems are telling us about human nature. And then of the two, which of the systems is the system that informs corrections in the United States today? I think there's a right answer for that, but you could make a case to the contrary, and I'm willing to listen to it. And that of these two, which do you think should be used in the United States, Pennsylvania or Auburn? And then just like I asked my husband on lecture, if you were incarcerated, which would you like to be housed in, Pennsylvania or Auburn? You tell me, if you were incarcerated, would you rather be incarcerated by the Pennsylvania system or the Auburn system? And then explain your answer. So that's that. Any questions?
Okay, this one I do have a question on. Was
Okay,
this, because I have the memory of a goldfish, was this chapter 12 or 13 in the textbook regarding either Pennsylvania or Auburn? Or am I just like completely missing it?
No, I just off the top of my head, I don't know, but I can tell you. So just hold on for a second. I think it's chapter
worries.
12. Well, it actually, let's just look at our website here. So final exam, go to home. Well, let's see what chapter we did for, it's topic 12. But what is the chapter? Let's see what it is. Readings and reading quiz. Oh, it's chapter 13.
Okay, awesome.
Because I think chapter
Thank you.
12 is like alternatives to incarceration, and then chapter 13 is like about corrections. Like,
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions about that? All right. Well, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And so that's what you got yourself up against. Is there any, anything else you would like to talk about, or any concepts you'd like to go over, or anything? Or are you feeling pretty set just to get started working on the exam?
I'm feeling pretty all right.
Okay.
I mean, that was a pretty thorough explanation.
Okay, good. Todd or Julia, you good?
I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good too.
And just as for grading and stuff, I think in this class, I'm like caught up. So where everything that you've submitted has been graded, except now you have your court report. So I'll start grading those, try to get, I teach 3 classes, and for some bonkers reason, I had all my classes submit papers on the last week. So I have a lot of grading to do before I grade the finals, but I'm going to be working hard on getting that stuff done so that as you come closer to turning your exam in, hopefully you'll have your grade on that paper, but no promises. But they will be done before your final exam is due at the end of the day on the 18th. Okay. And then it usually takes me I try to get grades completed for this class, for all my classes, by the 23rd. That's always my goal. I usually meet my goal. So I'll keep you apprised on Canvas. And so once I complete grading, I'll post it on Canvas. And then there's usually, I wait 24 hours for people to complain before I, just joking, please don't complain, before I post it onto the pause. Okay. So that's kind of the timeline that we're looking at. Okay. All right. Well, that's it from me. Good luck on your finals, and thanks for all your hard work this semester. I really appreciate it. And I'm usually available. I wouldn't say 24/7, but I teach all my classes online, so I'm pretty wired in. So if you have questions, email me, text me, or if you need to set up a Zoom meeting, I'm totally cool with that. All right. So hearing no other questions, good luck with the rest of your finals, and I will maybe talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.